Welcome to AIM, what is Individual Directed Goods and Services? This information session is being held to review AIM's policies and practices for IDGS through the Self-Direction Program. AIM's Individual Directed Goods and Services policies and practices are not changing. However, this session is meant to give a more in-depth education on the overall topic. AIM emphasizes working with your self-direction team, including but not limited to your team self-direction coordinator, accounts payable specialist, or additional AIM support teams as needed for questions regarding individual directed goods and services. Please note that we will not be reviewing how to enter reimbursements. If you did want to learn more about how to enter a reimbursement, AIM encourages you to attend a live Evero portal representative training available on the AIM self-direction website under the option Education Calendar. Let's get started. AIM will be reviewing the following topics during today's session: Individual Directed Goods and Services or IDGS overview, discussion of IDGS eligibility within the self-direction budget, including supporting documentation such as the Life Plan and Staff Action Plan, and IDGS budget categories. AIM will be reviewing information about AIM's policies and practices, including reimbursements and review of IDGS resources and tools for teams to utilize. By definition, Individual Directed Goods and Services, or IDGS, is a Medicaid funded section of the self direction budget for services, equipment, or supplies that address an identified need in a participant's service plan. For any item or service to be approved for IDGS funding in any category, it must pass all 5 OPWDD self direction program criteria. Self-direction funds cannot be used to purchase IDGS services if they are available through the Medicaid state plan or OPWDD's Home and Community-Based Services waiver. By practice, individual directed goods and services provides an opportunity for a person self-directing to participate in funding different aspects of their life to support diverse personal outcomes. A self-directed person can utilize IDGS funds if they are active in the budget and justified in supporting documentation, such as the Life Plan and Staff Action Plan, if applicable. IDGS is beneficial to both the person who is self-directing and their representative by supporting habilitative needs, health, safety, and independence, working in partnership with AIM and Circle of Support teams to navigate the choice of goods and services and to ensure smooth processing of eligible reimbursement requests. The person who is self-directing with budget authority must work within a personal resource account or PRA to develop a self-direction budget. The person makes choices about the goods and services they wish to receive and selects who is paid to provide them or how they are purchased. A person who maintains budget authority and works within a personal resource account may access needed goods or services through budget lines such as the individual directed goods and services. New York State OPWDD is the overseeing entity providing guidance on the self-direction program in which providers like AIM and Circle of Support teams have a responsibility to maintain both state and federal home and community-based service settings rules. The self-directing person or their representative and the Circle of Support team may adapt the budget and services as wants and needs change while working within a co-management model to maintain programmatic and reimbursement standards. Within this guidance, specific programmatic criteria are outlined to identify person-centered eligible items available in the budget and the ways in which the self-directing person may access items. A fiscal intermediary, or FI, works with the person to complete billing and payment for goods and services identified in the budget. All requested budget items must meet certain New York State OPWDD self-direction criteria to qualify for reimbursement. AIM's programmatic and fiscal teams work in partnership with the self-directing person and with their circle of support to adhere to OPWDD's self-direction programmatic and AIM reimbursement policies and practices to ensure smooth processing of person centered eligible items under the IDGS category. IDGS is a Medicaid funded section of the self direction budget with a $32,000 annual funding cap. The five IDGS criteria outlined in the New York State OPWDD self direction program guidance includes must be related to a valued outcome, must increase the self directing person's independence, must promote opportunities for community inclusion and or increase the self directing person's safety and independence in their home environment, can be accommodated without compromising the self directing person's health or safety, and is provided to or directed exclusively toward the benefit of the self directing person. Please note that additional criteria must be met for specific categories of IDGS. For questions on IDGS options, the self directing person and or their representative should work with their care manager, support worker, and AIM self-direction coordinator to assist with person-centered planning. AIM offers additional supports and services such as reimbursable services and education and training to teams as needed. IDGS criteria includes being related to a valued outcome in the self-directed person's plan, which will need to be outlined in supporting documents such as the life plan and staff action plan if applicable. Representatives with budget authority are responsible for routine evaluation and updates to person centered planning documents in partnership with their Circle of Support team. AIM recommends that the representative and Circle of Support team build strong, routine communication when updates or changes are requested in supporting documents. Updates typically occur during life plan meetings and minimally every 6 months. However, these documents may be updated at any time to drive personal outcomes of the person self directing and to ensure smooth processing of eligible items and issuing payment back to the self directing person or their representative. As a self directing person's habilitative needs change, the Circles of Support team should be actively justifying this to support programmatic and reimbursement standards. All IDGS budget categories should be aligned with the five IDGS criteria and supporting documents as these documents justify funding of eligible items. Routine communication. Representatives should develop a working partnership with AIM and their circle of support to communicate updates, answer questions, and address concerns. AIM offers additional supports and services to ensure the self directing person is successful in managing their budget categories. Person centered practices. The person self-directing and or their representative will work in partnership with the circle of support to provide in-depth justification for IDGS budget options and to identify valued outcomes that align with the person's plan. All IDGS categories should be aligned with the five criteria and supporting documentation as these documents justify funding of eligible items in the self-direction budget. IDGS funding. Representatives, Circle support teams, and AIM will work in partnership to adhere to programmatic and reimbursement criteria to ensure smooth processing of eligible items and issuing payment back to the self directing person or their representative. IDGS criteria includes additional criteria that must be met for specific IDGS categories and identified excluded items in the New York State OPWDD self direction guidance. IDGS may have expenses that are not eligible for reimbursement. Excluded items are items that are not eligible through Medicaid funded services and can be identified on the IDGS definitions chart included in the self direction program guidance. For questions on IDGS criteria, the self directing person and or their representative should work with their care manager, their support worker, and their AIM self direction coordinator to assist with person centered planning. AIM offers additional supports and services such as reimbursable services and education and training to teams as needed. The IDGS section of the budget is limited to the following categories of supports: camp, community classes and publicly available training coaching, Coaching and education for parents, spouses, and advocates involved in the person's self directed services, clinician consultants, independent contractors for non direct service provision, including clinical consultation specialties, clinician, which is the direct provision of therapies and therapeutic activities not otherwise funded in the state plan, health club and organizational memberships, household related items or services, interpretation services, paid neighbor, self directed staffing support, transition programs for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and transportation. Please note that even though the following categories are accessible in the IDGS section of the budget, they must adhere to OPWDD programmatic and AIM reimbursement standards for each funding item. Camp category of the budget promotes community integration and structured socialization to support the person's valued outcomes in the summer months, June to September. A combination of programmatic and reimbursement policies support this funding category, including the OPWDD self direction program. It must meet all IDGS criteria. Camp must be in New York State. Camp must have Department of Health license. Camp must take place in the summer months, and camp has an annual cap of $4,000. AIM's IDGS resource chart includes information on AIM policies and practices for issuing reimbursement to the self directing person. IDGS reimbursements are processed and paid based on the date submitted in Evero. An example of a self directing person who would benefit from IDGS camp may be someone who wants to enjoy structured time with their peers during the summer. Community classes and publicly available training and coaching category of the budget promotes community integration that teaches a subject or skill to support the person's valued outcomes. A combination of programmatic and reimbursement policies support this funding category, including OPWDD self-direction program, cannot be duplicative of any other OPWDD waiver service, cannot be restrictive solely to people with intellectual and or developmental disabilities. It must be open to the broader public with established and published rates. Must not be credit bearing for matriculated students. Must not be in a setting accessed only by people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. This includes all certified settings. Classes that do not adhere to standards identified in the broader IDGS rules and standards are also not covered, for example, experimental therapies. Private classes or lessons are allowable if it is related to the valued outcome and if it is publicly available. AIM IDGS resource and chart includes information on AIM policies and practices for issuing reimbursement to the self directing person. Virtual classes must be interactive and not pre recorded or self paced. IDGS reimbursements are processed and paid based on the date submitted in Evero. An example of a self directing person who would benefit from IDGS classes may be someone who wants to learn a skill or subject with active engagement in the community. Coaching and education for parents, spouses, and advocates involved in the person's self directed services category offers funding towards a parent or representative attending or participating in educational opportunities that are not otherwise covered by other public programs. A combination of programmatic and reimbursement policies support this funding category, including OPWDD self-direction program, must relate back to the self-directed person's disability and or valued outcome. Is available to people over age of 18. Family members under age 18 can work with their care manager to access family education training opportunities. Annual cap of $500. AIM IDGS resource and chart includes information on AIM policies and practices for issuing reimbursement to the self-directing person. IDGS reimbursements are processed and paid based on the date submitted in Evero. An example of a self-directing person who would benefit from IDGS coaching education may be a self-directing person who wants their representative or parent to further their knowledge on the person's disability. Clinician Consultants Non-Direct Services offers funding to support staff in gaining skills that directly relate to the person's habilitative need. A combination of programmatic and reimbursement policies support this funding category, including OPWDD Self-Direction Program. Evaluate the person's habilitation plan. Training self-hired staff in delivering the self-direction plan who might not otherwise have such resources available to them. Evaluation of the effectiveness of staff delivering services. Cannot replicate any services available through third-party insurer, the Medicaid state plan, or OPWDD home and community-based service waiver. Consultants must provide a written outline of services to be delivered prior to approval and an annual update of progress for the need to continue. Professionals must be a member of the profession under the jurisdiction of New York State Education Department Office of Professions and meet all licensing requirements verified on the New York State Education Department website. The hourly amount paid cannot exceed the 90th percentile for the hourly wage outlined by the Bureau of Labor Statistics verified on the BLS website. Please note the following disciplines are authorized with clinical regulations: psychology, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language pathology, social work, nursing, nutrition and dietetics, and rehab counseling. AIM IDGS resource and chart includes information on AIM policies and practices for issuing reimbursement to the self-directing person. AIM cannot make partial payment if an invoice exceeds the 90th percentile threshold. IDGS reimbursements are processed and paid based on the date submitted in eVero. An example of a self-directing person who would benefit from IDGS clinician consultants non-direct services may be a self-directing person who wants their self-hired staff to receive clinical disability-related training to better support their individualized needs. Clinician Direct Services offers funding for the purpose of providing direct habilitative supports to the self-directing person and aligns with valued outcomes. A combination of programmatic and reimbursement policies support this funding category, including OPWDD Self-Direction Program. Must include a written prescription from the person's medical doctor with a goal of treating a specific medical diagnosis or condition and shall support a specific valued outcome. The therapist conducts the initial assessment to propose a treatment plan, with the plan including treatment goals, therapeutic activities, and anticipated frequency or duration of time. The treatment plan should acknowledge the personal goals and support specific valued outcomes outlined in supporting documentation, such as the life plan and staff action plan if applicable. The treatment plan becomes active upon the referring or prescribing medical doctor's review and written approval. Ongoing treatment services shall be delivered only in accordance with the approved treatment plan. Each session shall be documented with a brief treatment note outlining therapeutic services or activities performed, duration, and response to treatment. Therapists shall provide periodic with a minimum of semi-annual progress reports to the referring or prescribing medical doctor and review progress towards goals and any necessary updates or revisions to the treatment plan. The medical doctor shall review the progress and approve updated treatment plan and continuation of services in writing. The provider must be a New York State licensed therapist or a professional that is a member of the profession under the jurisdiction of New York State Education Department Office of Professions and meet all licensing requirements verified on the New York State Education Department website. The hourly amount paid cannot exceed the 90th percentile for the hourly wage outlined by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, verified on the BLS website. Please note the following disciplines are authorized with clinical regulations: hippotherapy, therapeutic riding and equine assisted activities, therapy for aquatics, art, massage, music, and play. AIM IDGS resource and chart includes information on AIM policies and practices for issuing reimbursement to the self-directing person. AIM cannot make partial payments if invoices exceed the 90th percentile threshold. IDGS reimbursements are processed and paid based on the date submitted in eVero. An example of a self-directing person who would benefit from IDGS clinician direct services may be a self-directing person who is receiving clinical disability-related services to support their individualized. Health club and organizational memberships, category of the budget, promotes community integration and health and fitness to support the person's valued outcomes. A combination of programmatic and reimbursement policies support this funding category, including OPWDD self-direction program. Membership is for the self-directing person only. Family memberships are not allowed with IDGS funding. It must offer enrollment to the public and cannot be a private club with closed membership where it is only available via invitation. A self-directing person may hold multiple memberships to health clubs. There is an annual cap of $1,500. AIM IDGS resource and chart includes information on AIM policies and practices for issuing reimbursement to the self-directing person. IDGS reimbursements are processed and paid based on the date submitted in eVero. AIM offers recurring payments for annual membership costs. Please reach out to your accounts payable specialist for more information. An example of a self-directing person who would benefit from IDGS memberships may be a self-directing person who is interested in improving their health by exercising at a community gym. Household-related items and services category of the budget is to maximize the person's ability to be independent and support valued outcomes. A combination of programmatic and reimbursement policies support this funding category, including OPWDD self-direction program. Items cannot be funded through any other funding program and may include small appliances. Items must benefit the individual and be related to a valued outcome and/or health and safety. Must benefit the individual and be related to a valued outcome and health and/or safety. Household support such as cleaning, minor maintenance, snow removal, and lawn mowing is only for self-directing people living independently and not living in a family home. There is an annual cap of $1,500. Please note that the Community Transition Services Waiver Service and funding cap remains separate from IDGS funding. AIM IDGS resource and chart includes information on AIM policies and practices for issuing reimbursement to the self-directing person. IDGS reimbursements are processed and paid based on the date submitted in eVero. An example of a self-directing person who would benefit from IDGS household-related items and services may be someone who wants to increase independence to safely cook for themselves. Interpretation services category of the budget is to assist with maximizing the person's communication and independence. A combination of programmatic and reimbursement policies support this funding category. OPWDD self-direction program cannot duplicate any Medicaid-funded service provider's requirement to communicate with a person, such as community habilitation, Medicaid service coordination, or hospitalization. Includes language interpretation but not translation services. Payment may not exceed the entity's established fees. Payment must be made to a formal interpretation service. Must be directly related to valued outcomes, safeguards, and services identified and approved in the self-direction budget. The following questions should be answered. What valued outcome or safeguard is this activity in support of? What service was the interpretation related to? What service was actually provided? Who provided the service? AIM IDGS resource and chart includes information on AIM policies and practices for issuing reimbursement to the self-directing person. IDGS reimbursements are processed and paid based on the date submitted in eVero. An example of a self-directing person who would benefit from IDGS interpretation services may be someone who wants to maximize their communication. Paid neighbor category of the budget is for the purpose of having someone available to respond to the self-directing person and support when needed. A combination of programmatic and reimbursement policies support this funding category, including the OPWDD self-direction program. Must clock in to provide direct self-hired services when called upon. Specific duties are defined in a contract signed by the paid neighbor and the fiscal intermediary. The paid neighbor staff person cannot be a family member of the self-directing person. Must meet all requirements for background check and training that would be required for a self-hired staff person. $800 monthly cap. AIM IDGS resource and chart includes information on AIM policies and practices for issuing reimbursement to the self-directing person. AIM paid neighbor contract and W-9 must be on file with AIM. IDGS reimbursements are processed and paid based on the date submitted in eVero. An example of a self-directing person who would benefit from IDGS paid neighbor may be someone who wants to live independently in the community with access to on-call support as needed. Self-directed staffing support category of the budget is for the purpose of assisting with tasks outside of fiscal intermediary and support broker duties. A combination of programmatic and reimbursement policies support this funding category, including OPWDD self-direction program, not to duplicate FI employer responsibilities or broker services related to development of the self-directed person's plan. The self-hired staffing support is not a staff person for a nonprofit agency and is not actively assisting the self-directing person in making decisions regarding their self-directed services. Cannot be a family member or a member of the person's freely chosen planning team. Must meet all requirements for a background check and excluded provider status. There is a $20 per hour cap. AIM IDGS resource and chart includes information on AIM policies and practices for issuing reimbursement to the self-directing person. Staff support agreement and W-9 must be on file with AIM. IDGS reimbursements are processed and paid based on the date submitted in eVero. An example of a self-directing person who would benefit from IDGS self-directed staffing support may be someone who wants support with self-hired staff related paperwork. Transition programs for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities category of the budget is a post-secondary opportunity for people to gain skills for educational and vocational outcomes to maximize independence and support valued outcomes. A combination of programmatic and reimbursement policies support this funding category, including OPWDD Self-Direction Program, tuition for non-credit bearing transition programs for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities who have already completed their educational program or aged out of educational services. Coursework must address a person's valued outcomes and address skill building and employment outcomes. Programs may be provided in non-site-based settings on college campuses, but not in locations certified by OPWDD. Coursework may include training on personal care skills, social skills, provided to support vocational outcomes for the self-directing person. To be funded via a person's self-direction budget and cannot be funded via Access VR, IDEA, or other funding sources. Services are time limited and cannot exceed a 2-year timeframe. No room and board costs are fundable. Must meet all requirements for a background check and excluded provider status. Published fees cannot be exceeded. There's a $350 per class or $800 per month tuition cap. AIM IDGS resource and chart includes information on AIM policies and practices for issuing reimbursement to the self-directing program. IDGS reimbursements are processed and paid based on the date submitted in eVero. An example of a self-directing person who would benefit from IDGS transition programs may be someone who wants to attend a program for students with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities after high school. Transportation category of the budget is to promote access to community integration opportunities supported under the IDGS category, IDGS service-related transportation. A combination of programmatic and reimbursement policies support this funding category, including OPWDD self-direction program, directly related to valued outcomes, safeguards, and services identified and approved in the self-direction budget. To determine service-related transportation, the following questions must be answered. What valued outcome or safeguard is this activity in support of? What service was this transportation related to? What service was actually provided? Who provided the service? Costs are not reimbursed through the self-direction budget to and from OPWDD funded services for which transportation costs are included in the rate or fee developed or paid via billable service time. The vehicle must be operated by a licensed driver. Mileage reimbursement cannot exceed standard federal mileage rates established by the IRS. This covers all operating costs related to the vehicle, such as gas, registration, inspection, insurance, repairs, and maintenance. Reimbursement of public transportation and paratransport are limited to published rates. Discounts related to the person with disabilities should be requested when available. Family members cannot be reimbursed for medical appointments. May be paid out for access to generic service in the community, reimbursed within the budget, whether or not a paid staff person is present. AIM IDGS resource and chart includes information on AIM policies and practices for issuing reimbursement to the self-directing person. IDGS reimbursements are processed and paid based on the date submitted in Evero. An example of a self-directing person who would benefit from IDGS transportation may be someone who is traveling to and from an IDGS reimbursed service in their self-direction budget. The IDGS section of the budget may have expenses that are not eligible for reimbursement. Excluded items are items that are not eligible through Medicaid-funded services and can be identified on the IDGS definitions chart included in the self-direction program guidance, which outlines the following. Excluded items include academic tutoring, automatic pill dispensers or medication systems, cell phones or telephones, computer hardware, computer programs or software, leased and purchased vehicles, health-related services, equipment, and supplies, items or services from a vendor that presents a conflict of interest, parents or self-directing persons' activity fees, expenses, and meals per New York State OPWDD Self-Direction Guidance, page 27. Example, tickets to a performance. AIM must adhere to OPWDD programmatic standards for each funding item, including all excluded items identified in the self-direction guidance. AIM works in partnership with the Circle of Support to adhere to OPWDD programmatic and AIM reimbursement policies and practices to drive personal outcomes of the person self-directing and to ensure smooth processing of eligible items and issuing payment back to the self-directing person or representative. As a self-directing person's habilitative needs change, the Circle of Support team should be actively justifying this to support programmatic and reimbursement standards. All IDGS budget categories should be aligned with the 5 IDGS criteria and supporting documents, as these documents justify funding of eligible items in the self-direction budget. The key takeaways for the overall reimbursement include the following. OPWDD self-direction program guidance and IDGS 5 criteria for eligibility. Supporting documents, including life plan and staff action plan if applicable, clearly identify justification and valued outcomes. AIM cannot retroactively reimburse items that have been purchased prior to the budget effective date or the budget category open and approved with available funding. Invoice must include reimbursement criteria such as an itemized receipt and proof of payment. Please work with your Circle of Support and with AIM teams for specific programmatic questions of IDGS items and eligibility. AIM fiscal teams will review and approve eligible items and adhere to AIM's reimbursement policies. The following chart is for AIM IDGS reimbursements. This tool is available to Circle of Support teams to better navigate programmatic and fiscal standards while maintaining person-centered practices and budget authority. The reimbursement chart specifically details each eligible item and AIM requirements for reimbursement, working in tandem with the self-direction and OPWDD guidance. This tool is accessible on the self-direction website, amongst other AIM tools and resources for individual directed goods and services. AIM encourages teams to routinely communicate with their circle of support and with their self-direction team to ensure smooth processing of eligible items and issuing payment back to the self-directing person or their representative. AIM runs two reimbursement processing timelines for each month. Each timeline follows AIM's reimbursement process, reimbursement policies, and program standards. The first reimbursement process timeline establishes that any invoice or request with all necessary supporting documentation entered by the first of the month will be processed and paid by the 16th of the month or the next business day. The second reimbursement process timeline establishes that any invoice or request with all necessary supporting documentation entered by the 15th of the month will be processed and paid by the 31st or the last business day of the month. AIM holds a 60-day reimbursement window from the date of service. AIM encourages Circle of Support teams to work with the reimbursable services pre-approval process to ensure costs incurred are eligible for reimbursement. This optional offering benefits the self-directing person or their representative with limited cash on hand. These services can be very helpful in supporting the self-directing person to live life more financially independent and avoid unnecessary out-of-pocket expenses. AIM encourages Circle support teams to set up direct or recurring payments rather than incur upfront costs and then seek reimbursement. These services can be very helpful in supporting the self-directing person to live life more independently. This practice also ensures timely payments and helps AIM maintain program standards. Recurring payments. If desired, AIM can set up recurring payments, which will assist with populating invoices into automatic monthly invoices for payment. Payment cannot be issued until after the service has been rendered. Invoices for multiple months will be processed and paid out on a month-to-month cycle. Example, a yearly IDGS membership will be processed and paid out on a monthly cycle with the total cost of the invoice divided by 12. Your accounts payable specialist will set up recurring payments in Evero to automatically populate these invoices for AIM's reimbursement processing timelines. Direct pay. AIM offers a direct payment option with all cleared vendors. This allows AIM to directly pay the provider and for the person receiving support to avoid out-of-pocket expenses. Direct payment is available to all vendors but is based on vendor participation. Please note that additional paperwork may be required when opting into direct pay. For questions regarding approved vendors or to set up direct payment, please reach out to your accounts payable specialist or your self-direction coordinator for further guidance. The AIM difference. Circle of supports are assigned AIM self-direction administrative teams. AIM self-direction administrative teams specialize in their roles and responsibilities to wrap around the self-directing person throughout the program. These team members include the self-direction coordinator as the point person for the self-directing person and or their representative to assist with all self-direction needs such as programmatic questions, participation in planning meetings, review of supporting documents, and circle of support communication. The accounts payable specialist works in partnership with the circle of support and with AIM self-direction admin teams to ensure smooth processing of expenses available within the budget by maintaining review of programmatic and reimbursement criteria. The staff supports coordinator acts as a liaison between staff and the circle of support team, assisting with AIM policies and practices, staff employment status changes, staff evaluations, and benefits as applicable. AIM has additional supports and services available to staff and circle of support teams, including the following: education and training team and reimbursable services team. AIM offers robust training opportunities and methods for self-directed people and circle of support teams to be successful and confident in their partnership and role and responsibilities. The education and training team has created different learning pathways for a combination approach, including the following: AIM live weekly trainings. AIMS Training and Education team hosts live interactive sessions on Zoom available for Circle of Supports and staff. During these sessions, attendees will learn how to use the Evero platform for their role. However, anyone can register for training on AIM's self-direction website on the education calendar. For Circle of Support teams, training is held on Thursdays. Circle of Supports are invited and encouraged to attend training. Attendees of weekly training receive a follow-up email to include direct access to AIM tools and resources, as well as the education and training team contact for more individualized support as needed. AIM step-by-step Evero instructions. AIM has also developed how-to documents for the Evero platform with screen-by-screen instructions for each function of the software. Teams can access these documents by emailing their accounts payable specialist or by visiting AIM's self-direction website. AIM how-to YouTube videos. AIM has developed on-demand videos as an optional method for flexibility and self-paced learning. AIM self-direction YouTube playlist includes how-to videos with complete screen-by-screen instructions on each function in Evero. Teams can access these videos by emailing their accounts payable specialist or by visiting AIM's YouTube channel. AIM self-direction team. For person-specific supports, teams have designated AIM administrative representatives to provide wraparound support, such as the accounts payable specialist, self-direction coordinator, staff supports coordinator, and circle of support team. This is a visual example of AIM's self-direction website at www.aimservicesinc.org, where teams can access tools and resources 24/7. AIM's YouTube channel is also available 24/7 with self-paced how-to videos for external teams as another learning option for self-direction. AIM encourages Circle of Support teams to be in routine communication with their self-direction coordinator and with their accounts payable specialist. If you need assistance locating your team, please visit the self-direction staff directory link to locate your AIM administrative team. Thank you for joining this session, AIM, What is Individual Directed Goods and Services?